10 brain training secrets you need to know now. If you knew that your brain is running a hidden code, one that determines how much success, money, clarity, and opportunity you allow into your life, wouldn't you want to rewrite it today? Because that's exactly what we're doing here, right now. You're about to learn 10 brain training secrets that millionaires, peak performers, visionaries, and the world's most prosperous thinkers use daily, even if they never talk about it publicly. And I'm going to give them to you straight, without fluff, without sugarcoating, without long speeches that go nowhere. You want transformation? Let's activate it. You want the clarity that leads to success? Let's switch it on. You want prosperity, abundance, confidence, and mental power? Then this is your moment, because everything changes from here. But before you start listening, ask yourself this. Why have some people with fewer advantages, fewer resources, fewer connections, managed to reshape their reality at a level you know you're capable of reaching, yet haven't reached yet? What do they know about their mind that you don't? What mental switches did they flip that opened doors most people walk past without ever noticing them? Maybe you felt it, that quiet inner voice telling you you're meant for more, that your brain has more potential than you're currently accessing, that your future is bigger than your circumstances. The truth is simple. Your brain becomes whatever you consistently train it to become. And today, you're going to learn how to train it, like someone who succeeds on purpose. So settle in, focus, and get ready for a level of mental expansion that most people never experience in their entire lives. Because if you truly absorb these 10 brain training secrets, nothing, absolutely nothing, will stay the same. Topic 1. The secret of neural dominance. Your brain is always training itself, with or without your permission. There is a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when a person realizes that their entire life has been shaped not by luck, not by talent, not by resources, but by the patterns their brain has rehearsed for years without them even noticing it. And when this realization hits, it hits with the force of a revelation. Your brain is training itself every single day, whether you are aware of it or not. Every repeated thought, every emotional loop, every story you replay in your mind becomes part of your identity. The shocking truth is that most people are living inside a mental architecture they never consciously designed. And the wealthiest, happiest, most successful individuals in the world, they all share one secret. They took control of their brain's training instead of letting the world train it for them. Think about how many times you've told yourself something without questioning it. I'm not good enough. I never get the break I deserve. I always mess things up. People like me don't get rich. Success is for others. These thoughts don't feel dramatic because they've become familiar. But familiar doesn't mean true. It just means repeated. Your brain loves efficiency. It automates whatever you rehearse. And once a thought becomes automated, it begins to feel real. This is why people with extraordinary potential stay stuck in ordinary lives. They don't fail because they're incapable. They fail because their brains have memorized a version of themselves far smaller than what they could actually become. When you study ultra-successful people, something becomes crystal clear. Warren Buffett trained his brain to think in decades, not days, rewiring his reward system to value long-term gain over immediate gratification. Sarah Blakely trained her brain to interpret failure as feedback, dissolving the fear response that paralyzes most people before they even start. Elon Musk trained his brain to tolerate uncertainty, pressure, and risk at a level that would overwhelm the average mind. Jeff Bezos trained his mind to chase big, bold, almost absurd ideas long before there was any evidence they would work. These people did not inherit superhuman minds. They trained their brains the way athletes train their muscles. They sculpted them. They challenged them. They reprogrammed the way they interpret reality. And over time, the world responded to the architecture of their thinking. Here's the breakthrough you need to understand. Your brain cannot tell the difference between a thought you imagine and a thought you experience. It only knows what you repeat. If you repeatedly think empowering thoughts, your brain strengthens the neural connections that support confidence, abundance, clarity, and action. If you repeatedly think limiting thoughts, your brain strengthens the neural circuits of fear, scarcity, doubt, and hesitation. The brain does not choose sides. It simply follows the instructions you give it through repetition and emotion. This is why someone can grow up with nothing, surrounded by negativity, lack, and chaos, and still rise to unimaginable levels of wealth and influence. They rewrote the story running inside their heads. They interrupted the old patterns and replaced them with new mental scripts that aligned with the life they wanted to build. When Oprah Winfrey says that she learned to direct her focus toward what she wanted instead of what she feared, she is describing brain training. When Jim Carrey talks about visualizing success so vividly that his mind couldn't distinguish imagination from reality, he is describing neural rewiring. When Kobe Bryant describes practicing shots in his mind until they felt familiar, he is describing mental repetition shaping physical mastery. The mind evolves based on what it is fed consistently. But here is the part that most people never acknowledge. The brain does not wait for your permission. It is always sculpting itself around whatever you give your attention to. If you feed it complaints, it becomes an expert at noticing what's wrong. If you feed it gratitude, it becomes an expert at noticing what's right. If you feed it excuses, it creates an identity built on helplessness. If you feed it discipline, it builds an identity grounded in power and self-respect. If you feed it fear, it becomes hyper-vigilant and defensive. If you feed it faith, it becomes perceptive, creative, and bold. The brain is a mirror. It reflects everything you rehearse. Once you understand that your brain is training itself every moment, you can no longer live unconsciously. You start paying attention to your internal dialogue. You start catching yourself mid-thought, questioning beliefs that once felt like unchangeable truths. You begin noticing how quickly your mind defaults to the same emotions, the same behaviors, the same interpretations. You become aware of how familiar suffering feels, how predictable self-doubt is, how rehearsed limitation has become. And that awareness is the beginning of transformation. Because once you become aware of a pattern, you can interrupt it. And once you can interrupt it, you can rewrite it. Imagine for a moment that your brain is a software running old code. You were not the programmer when that code was written. Your childhood, your culture, your failures, your environment, your fears wrote most of it. But now you finally have access to the operating system. You can rewrite the code, you can upgrade it, you can delete what no longer serves you and install what aligns with your next level of success. You are both the user and the engineer of your mind. This is why repetition is not something you do casually. It is something you do strategically. When you choose the thoughts you repeat, you choose the identity you become. When you choose what you focus on, you choose the world your brain filters for you. You create new neural dominance, new mental architecture, new emotional reflexes, new behavioral patterns, and eventually new results. This is the real secret wealthy and successful people understand. Success is not the outcome of lucky breaks or extraordinary genetics. Success is the outcome of trained thinking. Their minds became powerful because they were deliberate about the thoughts they rehearsed. They fed their brains with possibility until possibility became normal. They fed their brains with abundance until abundance became expected. They fed their brains with certainty until doubt no longer had a voice. And now it's your turn. Because once you know that your brain is always training itself, you realize that every thought is a choice. Every belief is programmable. Every limitation is rewritable. And the moment you start training your mind with intention instead of habit, your entire reality begins to shift. Quietly at first, then loudly, then unmistakably. This is neural dominance. This is mental reprogramming. This is the foundation of all prosperity. And now that you understand it, you're ready for the next secret. Because everything you build from here will depend on how intentionally you train the thoughts you allow to live inside your mind. Topic 2. The Attention Master. Switch what you focus on expands in your brain and in your life. There is a hidden switch inside the human brain that determines the quality of your decisions, the clarity of your thoughts, the opportunities you perceive, and the level of prosperity you allow into your life. Most people never touch this switch. They don't even know it exists. But every successful entrepreneur, every millionaire thinker, every high-impact creator who rises from ordinary beginnings to extraordinary influence learns how to activate it. This switch is your attention. Your attention is the most valuable currency you possess, more valuable than time, effort, or intelligence. Because your attention determines the reality your brain chooses to magnify, prioritize, and ultimately create. When you master your attention, everything in your life reorganizes around your new mental focus. The brain contains a powerful system called the reticular activating system, the RAS, a filter that decides what information reaches your conscious mind. It processes millions of signals, but only lets through the ones that match whatever you consistently focus on. This is why, when you're considering buying a certain car, suddenly you see that car everywhere. It's why when you feel insecure, you notice every sign of rejection. It's why when you become fixated on scarcity, every financial setback feels like proof that money is slipping away from you. And it's why when you begin thinking in terms of abundance, wealth, and growth, your mind starts noticing opportunities that were invisible to you your entire life. They didn't suddenly appear. You simply became capable of noticing them. Successful people understand this instinctively or consciously. They know that attention is not passive, it is generative. It builds neural pathways, strengthens thought patterns, shapes emotional responses, and influences behavior. Elon Musk didn't become who he is because he had access to more hours in the day. He became who he is because of where he directed those hours mentally. His attention fixated on solutions so intensely that problems became stepping stones instead of obstacles. Oprah Winfrey didn't build an empire because she escaped adversity. She built it because she learned how to direct her attention toward meaning, possibility, and growth, even when the world around her offered her every reason to focus on pain. Steve Jobs trained his mind to filter out anything that wasn't aligned with his vision, turning attention into a laser beam that shaped the entire tech industry. They all mastered the same principle. Whatever you consistently give your attention to becomes the dominant force in your life. But here's the deeper truth. Your brain is not wired to give attention neutrally. It is wired to give attention to whatever feels emotionally charged. If fear is what you rehearse, your brain will amplify fear. If doubt is what you feed it, your brain will search for evidence to validate your doubt. If scarcity is your internal narrative, your brain will filter out all signs of abundance so that scarcity feels real, even inevitable. And yet, the moment you shift your attention toward empowerment, toward solutions, toward action, toward abundance, your brain shifts with you. The RAS rewires itself. The neural patterns reorganize. The emotional reflexes soften. You begin to see what was invisible. You begin to feel what was inaccessible. You begin to believe what once felt impossible. Attention shapes identity. If you focus on problems, you become a person defined by problems. If you focus on possibilities, you become a person defined by potential. If you focus on what's missing, you reinforce the identity of someone who never has enough. But when you focus on opportunity, even tiny ones, you begin to embody the identity of someone who creates results, someone who moves forward, someone whose internal world is aligned with progress. This is why people who shift their attention intentionally often describe their transformation as something almost mystical. It feels like life starts cooperating with them. They feel guided. They experience synchronicities. They attract unexpected solutions. But nothing magical is happening. Their brain simply began filtering life through a lens that favors growth. And when your brain favors growth, life responds accordingly. Imagine your mind as a spotlight on a dark stage. Wherever you aim the spotlight, that area becomes your entire world. If the spotlight is aimed at your insecurities, your world becomes insecurity. If it's aimed at your failures, your world becomes a collection of mistakes. If it's aimed at what you can't control, your world becomes overwhelming. But if you point that spotlight towards your strengths, your vision, your goals, your future, your possibilities, suddenly the stage changes. The same environment, the same circumstances, the same resources, but a completely different experience. You didn't change the stage, you changed the focus. And that singular shift creates a cascade of internal transformations that eventually shape your external reality. Science shows that focused attention strengthens the neural pathways required to sustain new behaviors. This means the more you focus on abundance, the more your brain normalizes abundance. The more you focus on problem solving, the more your brain becomes skilled at generating solutions. The more you focus on gratitude, the more your brain becomes wired to interpret life positively, even in stressful moments. This is not wishful thinking. This is neural conditioning. The brain rewires according to what you repeatedly notice. Which means the question is no longer, can I change my life? The real question is, Where am I directing my attention? And is it aligned with the future I want to create? People who build wealth often talk about a moment when they became obsessed, not in an unhealthy way, but in a focused, purposeful, intentional way. They tuned their minds into a frequency where ideas connected more easily, confidence felt more natural, and decisions seemed guided by an inner knowing. They weren't lucky. They were attentive. They chose their focus the way a sculptor chooses their tools. They didn't let distractions consume their mental energy. They protected their attention like gold, and as a result, they built lives that reflect the mental worlds they curated with precision. Your attention is always creating something. The only question is what? If you let your attention drift unconsciously, it will default to fear, to comparison, to limitation, to distraction. That is the brain's survival setting. But when you take control of your attention, when you direct it instead of letting it steer you, your brain shifts from survival mode to creation mode. And in creation mode, your life expands. Your opportunities expand. Your confidence expands. Your prosperity expands. This is the master switch that changes everything. When you understand that your attention determines the world your brain believes you live in, you stop wasting it on people who drain you, on thoughts that weaken you, on fears that imprison you. You begin to treat your attention as your greatest asset, your most sacred resource, your primary tool for creating the life you desire. Because once you control your attention, you control your mind. And once you control your mind, you control your destiny. Topic 3. Mental imagery reprogramming. Your brain believes what you rehearse in your mind. One of the most powerful secrets of the ultra-successful is something many people dismiss as too simple to matter: the ability to create vivid mental imagery that trains the brain to behave as if the desired future is already familiar. What most people don't realize is that the brain does not distinguish clearly between imagination and experience. When you visualize repeatedly, when you rehearse in your mind with clarity, emotion, and intention, your brain activates neural circuits almost identical to the ones used when the experience actually happens. It prepares your identity, your emotions, and your behavior to match a future that hasn't yet occurred. And this is where the breakthrough happens. Once your brain becomes familiar with a goal internally, it stops resisting it externally. This is why athletes visualize plays before stepping on the field. It's why performers mentally rehearse before walking onto a stage. It's why entrepreneurs like Sarah Blakely imagine themselves presenting their ideas to investors long before they had the opportunity. It's why founders like Walt Disney envisioned worlds so detailed that they eventually became physical realities. And perhaps one of the most famous examples is Jim Carrey, who visualized success so intensely and so consistently that he wrote himself a $10 million check years before he earned it, rehearsing the feeling of receiving it until reality had no choice but to catch up. The truth is that mental imagery is not wishful thinking, it is neural training. Visualization strengthens synaptic connections, primes motivational circuits, lowers psychological resistance, and rewrites emotional associations. If you've ever wondered why some people walk into opportunities with confidence, while others approach the same opportunities with fear, the difference lies in familiarity. The confident person has already lived the experience in their mind. Their brain recognizes it. It feels normal. It feels expected. And because it feels expected, they behave like someone who belongs in that moment. Your brain seeks comfort in what it has rehearsed. If it has rehearsed failure, it reproduces behaviors that lead toward failure. If it has rehearsed fear, it defaults to hesitation. If it has rehearsed smallness, it will feel intimidated by big opportunities. But when you rehearse success, when you mentally practice wealth, confidence, leadership, clarity, abundance, your brain begins to accept those internal scenes as part of your identity. And this is where reality starts shifting. You begin making decisions aligned with your vision. You begin speaking with more certainty, thinking more creatively, and taking action that previously felt out of reach. Your brain simply follows the script you've rehearsed. Visualization also influences what you notice, what you pursue, and what you believe you can handle. When you imagine a wealthier version of yourself, your brain begins scanning for ideas, connections, and insights that align with that version. When you imagine yourself taking bold action, your brain reduces the internal alarm system that normally activates when you step outside your comfort zone. When you visualize your goals vividly, your mind becomes emotionally attached to them. making procrastination harder and execution easier. The brain becomes invested in the outcome because it already feels real. But for visualization to work at its highest level, it must feel immersive. You must experience it with senses, emotions, and physical presence. You must imagine how it feels to walk into your new life, how your body moves, how your voice sounds, how your energy shifts. You must create scenes that feel honest, powerful, and deeply personal. When the brain senses emotion in an imagined scenario, it amplifies neural plasticity, allowing you to rewrite old beliefs more quickly. This is why people who visualize success often break through limiting beliefs that seemed immovable. They are not forcing change, they are training their brain to adopt a new identity. There are countless stories of individuals who transformed their lives through mental imagery before the world ever saw evidence of their potential. Oprah used visualization to rise beyond the limits of her environment, rehearsing feelings of purpose and influence long before she was recognized globally. Arnold Schwarzenegger visualized championship titles and acting success with such intensity that failure felt illogical. Even innovators like Steve Jobs used imagination not as escapism, but as a design tool, repeatedly picturing the future so clearly that it eventually became the next technological revolution. Their minds arrived long before their circumstances did. And the beauty of mental imagery is that it bypasses logic. You don't need to convince your brain that something is possible. You only need to show it what it feels like. The brain learns through experience, real or imagined. The moment your mind experiences a future internally, the future begins influencing the present. You start aligning your habits with the reality you're rehearsing. You start embodying traits of the person you are becoming. You start attracting opportunities that match your internal evolution. Imagine standing in your future home, not physically, but mentally. Notice the details, the colors, the textures, the feeling of safety and abundance. Imagine receiving a message saying your business generated more income in a month than you made in an entire year. Feel the disbelief shift into pride. Imagine walking on stage, being introduced as someone who changed thousands of lives. Hear the applause. Imagine sitting in silence, realizing you finally broke generational patterns and became the first in your family to create true financial freedom. Feel the gravity of that moment. When you feed your brain these experiences repeatedly, they become part of your psychological blueprint. You become the person who creates those outcomes because your mind already trusts them. And this is where visualization becomes unstoppable. Once your brain accepts a future emotionally, it begins rejecting anything that contradicts it. It resists old habits. It questions old beliefs. It becomes impatient with behaviors that no longer match your vision. It demands alignment. And alignment is the birthplace of transformation. Mental imagery is not a game. It is not fantasy. It is not delusion. It is neural preparation, identity engineering, and emotional programming. It is one of the most powerful tools for success, wealth, growth, and prosperity because it allows you to step into your future before reality reflects it. And the more vividly you live that future in your mind, the faster your external world rearranges itself to match the internal world you've created. Topic 4. Emotional conditioning. The state you live in becomes the life you create. If there is one truth people underestimate more than any other, it is this. Your emotional state is not a reaction to life. It is the architect of your life. Most people think emotions happen to them, that feelings rise and fall like unpredictable waves they must simply endure. But ultra-successful individuals understand something radically different. They know that emotions are patterns. Emotions are habits. Emotions are conditioned responses that the brain memorizes, strengthens, and repeats until they become personality traits. And once an emotional state becomes a personality trait, it becomes destiny. The life you experience externally is a reflection of the emotional climate you maintain internally. Think about how many people live in a constant state of stress, frustration, fear, or inadequacy without realizing that they've been rehearsing these emotional states for years. They wake up stressed, they go to work stressed, they talk about stress, they think about stress, until their brain wires stress as the default emotional tone of their lives. And then they wonder why opportunities seem overwhelming, why success feels out of reach, why clarity never arrives. The brain simply cannot create new outcomes from the emotional state that created the old ones. If you are emotionally anchored to scarcity, you will behave like someone who expects loss. If you are emotionally anchored to fear, you will behave like someone who anticipates danger. But if you are emotionally anchored to confidence, gratitude, focus, and possibility, the world looks different. You act differently. You attract differently. You decide differently. Emotions are not random chemicals floating through your brain. They are signals that shape the lens through which you interpret life. Neuroscience shows that when you repeatedly experience the same emotion, the brain strengthens the neural circuits associated with that emotion, making it easier to feel again in the future. This is why people who live in frustration become frustrated people, and those who live in hope become hopeful people. Your brain literally memorizes emotional states. Just like a pianist's fingers automatically find the keys after years of practice, your mind automatically seeks the emotional patterns you've rehearsed the most. This is why wealthy individuals and influential leaders invest so heavily in emotional conditioning. They know that their state determines their decisions, and their decisions determine their destiny. They know that high-level achievement requires emotional stability, not emotional chaos. They understand that a regulated nervous system is a competitive advantage. They train their emotions the way athletes train their bodies. They develop resilience. They strengthen optimism. They rehearse calm under pressure. They practice gratitude daily, because gratitude is not just a virtue. It is a neural strategy that trains the brain to notice abundance rather than lack. They choose emotions that empower their future, instead of emotions that reinforce their past. Think about Oprah Winfrey, who transformed incredible hardship into a life of influence by conditioning herself to maintain emotional meaning rather than emotional pain. Or investors like Warren Buffett, whose calm emotional temperament is one of the reasons he succeeds where others panic. Or entrepreneurs like Jeff Bezos, who navigated years of uncertainty with emotional steadiness powerful enough to keep moving when the rest of the world doubted him. The breakthroughs these people experienced were not only intellectual, they were emotional. Their nervous systems allowed them to make decisions most people are too stressed or afraid to make. Your emotional state influences your creativity, your motivation, your problem-solving, your communication, your habits, your self-worth, and even your financial behavior. Someone who feels abundant behaves differently with money than someone who feels insecure about it. Someone who feels confident will pursue opportunities that someone who feels unworthy would never dare to approach. Someone who feels empowered will take consistent action that someone who feels hopeless keeps postponing. Your emotional state is a magnet. It attracts experiences that match its frequency. But the most empowering part of emotional conditioning is this: emotions can be trained. You can teach your brain to adopt new emotional patterns. You can interrupt old emotional reflexes. You can transform the way you react to pressure, setbacks, rejection, or uncertainty. You can choose the emotional state you want to live in, and through repetition, your brain will memorize it until it becomes your new default. This is where emotional mastery becomes life-changing. Imagine waking up and choosing gratitude before your brain has a chance to role-play stress. Imagine facing a challenge and instinctively shifting into problem-solving mode instead of fear. Imagine having a difficult conversation and responding with calm instead of defensiveness. Imagine pursuing a dream and feeling excitement rather than inadequacy. These are not fantasies, they are trained emotional skills. With repetition, the brain accepts them as normal. The mistake most people make is trying to change their lives while staying emotionally anchored to the past. You cannot create abundance from a mindset of scarcity. You cannot create success from a state of self-doubt. You cannot create clarity while living in internal chaos. The emotional state you rehearse becomes the emotional state you return to, and the emotional state you return to determines the life you build. This is why emotional conditioning is not optional for anyone seeking prosperity. It is essential. If you want a better life, you must become emotionally fluent in the states that produce that life. You must become familiar with the emotions of your future self: confidence, certainty, peace, focus, empowerment, gratitude, vision. You must rehearse these emotions until your brain knows them as well as it once knew stress or fear. Because once your emotional state changes, your behavior changes, your energy changes, your decisions change, your identity changes. And when your identity changes, your entire reality reorganizes itself around that new emotional foundation. You begin attracting people who match your emotional frequency. You begin making choices aligned with your future. You begin moving with a sense of purpose that feels natural instead of forced. This is the essence of emotional conditioning. The state you live in becomes the life you create. Change the state, and the life follows. And when you finally understand that your emotions are not reactions but instructions to your brain, you step into a level of personal power most people never experience. From this point on, you are no longer a passenger inside your emotional world. You are the one driving it. Topic 5. The power of microactions. Small choices that rewire your brain and redesign your destiny. One of the greatest misconceptions in the world of success and transformation is the belief that massive change requires massive action. People assume they need dramatic shifts, sudden bursts of motivation, overnight breakthroughs, or life-changing events to finally become the person they want to be. But in reality, the opposite is true. The brain doesn't transform through intensity, it transforms through consistency. It doesn't rewire from one big decision, it rewires from thousands of small ones. This is the power of micro-actions, the tiny behavioral choices that seem insignificant in the moment, but ultimately become the architecture of your destiny. Your brain is constantly forming habits, whether you realize it or not. Every action you repeat, checking your phone first thing in the morning, complaining about something small, procrastinating a task, scrolling mindlessly, doubting yourself, replaying negative stories, becomes a signal to your brain that says, "This is who I am. Repeat this." And it does. It memorizes your behaviors with ruthless efficiency. It doesn't care if the habit is empowering or destructive. The brain's job is to automate whatever you repeat. Which means this: your habits create your identity long before your identity creates your habits. This is why micro-actions are so powerful. They bypass resistance. They slip under the radar of self-sabotage. They rewrite your identity gently, steadily, and in a way your brain can embrace without activating fear or overwhelm. When you take one small action toward your future self, reading one page of a book, doing 1 minute of visualization, choosing gratitude over irritation, speaking confidently in a small moment, doing a single task you avoided, you are casting a vote for the person you want to become. And with enough votes, that version of you becomes your new default. Think about successful people who built their empires from nothing. Their success was not the product of one monumental action. It was the accumulation of thousands of micro-actions. Warren Buffett read obsessively every day. He didn't read in 10-hour marathons. He read consistently, allowing his brain to internalize patterns of opportunity. Jeff Bezos built Amazon not through grand gestures, but through daily decisions that favored long-term growth over short-term comfort. Elon Musk trained his mind to solve problems incrementally, chipping away at impossibilities through sustained effort rather than sudden genius. Even athletes like Serena Williams didn't become legends by practicing only when inspired. She became a champion through micro-actions repeated so consistently that excellence became her nervous system's default setting. Micro-actions work because they directly influence neuroplasticity. The brain rewires itself based on frequent, repeated signals. When you take even the smallest step toward your goals, you activate neural circuits associated with discipline, motivation, and reward. Over time, those circuits strengthen, making it easier to take the next step and the next one. Eventually, the behavior becomes automatic. The internal resistance weakens, the old identity dissolves, the new identity emerges. You evolve not because you forced yourself to change, but because you built a life where your new behaviors feel natural. But micro-actions don't just change your habits, they change your self-perception. When you repeatedly behave like someone disciplined, your brain begins seeing you as disciplined. When you repeatedly act like someone confident, your brain begins believing you are confident. When you repeatedly move like someone committed to growth, your brain begins trusting that your future success is inevitable. These micro-actions quietly build a sense of self-respect, and self-respect is one of the most powerful psychological drivers of long-term success. When you respect yourself, you stop tolerating behaviors, environments, and patterns that keep you small. Most people underestimate micro-actions because they don't produce instant results. But instant results aren't the goal. Identity transformation is. And identity transformation happens one small decision at a time. Think about how different your life would be if you improved just 1% each day. Not dramatically, not explosively, just 1%. Over a year, that micro shift becomes a complete reinvention. The brain compounds effort the way wealth compounds interest. Consistency creates exponential results. Imagine this for a moment. You wake up tomorrow and choose one tiny action aligned with your wealthiest self. Maybe it's organizing a small part of your life, learning a skill for 5 minutes, exercising for a few moments, or writing a single paragraph of a project you've been avoiding. That one action might seem meaningless, but it sends a message to your brain. We are becoming someone new, and the brain responds by strengthening the neural circuits connected to that behavior. Repeat it again the next day, and the message becomes louder. Within weeks, your brain no longer identifies with your old patterns. It begins resisting behaviors that contradict your new direction. It becomes uncomfortable with your past limitations. It accelerates your evolution because you've shown it, through repeated micro-actions, the path you wanted to follow. The most successful people in the world are not the ones who take massive leaps occasionally. They are the ones who take small steps consistently. They understand that the micro decides the macro. The tiny choices decide the future. The small habits decide the destiny. They don't overwhelm their brains with unrealistic expectations. Instead, they build identities brick by brick, habit by habit, moment by moment, until their results reflect the accumulation of thousands of intentional micro-decisions. And this is the part that should inspire you deeply. Micro-actions are accessible to everyone. You don't need more money, more time, or more connections to start changing your life. You only need one tiny action aligned with your future self. One step that says, "I'm choosing growth today." One decision that shifts your trajectory by even 1 degree. Because 1 degree sustained over time leads to a completely different destination. When you understand this principle, success stops feeling distant or intimidating. It becomes manageable. It becomes inevitable. You don't need to overhaul your entire life. You only need to show up in small moments. Because the life you dream of is not built on rare explosions of brilliance. It is built on the quiet, consistent, unnoticed micro-actions that accumulate. Until one day, you look around and realize you have become someone extraordinary. Topic 6. Identity shifting. Your brain cannot outperform the person you believe you are. There comes a moment in every transformational journey when a person realizes that no amount of strategy, motivation, discipline, or knowledge can override a weak identity. You cannot outperform the person you believe yourself to be. You cannot act consistently in ways that contradict your internal self-image. You cannot create a successful, abundant, prosperous life while still identifying as someone who is unworthy, incapable, unlucky, or destined for struggle. The brain simply will not allow it. Your identity, your internal definition of who you are, acts as the upper limit of your behavior. And until you update that identity, every attempt at success will feel like pushing against a wall that won't move. Identity is not a philosophical concept. It is a neurological one. The brain forms an identity through repeated emotional experiences, beliefs, habits, and stories you've told yourself for years. These patterns become integrated into your sense of self, shaping not just how you behave, but what you believe is possible for you. If your identity says, "I'm someone who always struggles financially," your brain will subconsciously sabotage opportunities that contradict that belief. If your identity says, "I'm not confident," you will unconsciously avoid situations where confidence is required. If your identity says, "Success is for others," you will behave like someone waiting for proof rather than someone taking ownership of their destiny. Your identity becomes the invisible script directing every decision you make. This explains why two people with the same resources, skills, and opportunities can experience completely different outcomes. One person thrives because their identity supports the habits that lead to growth. The other person stays stuck because their identity rejects anything that doesn't match their internal story. Identity is the filter that determines what you allow yourself to have, do, and become. Wealthy individuals understand this intuitively. They think, behave, and make decisions from the identity of someone who expects wealth, not someone hoping for it. This internal expectation shapes their external results. When Jeff Bezos launched Amazon, he wasn't acting from the identity of a small business owner. He was acting from the identity of a visionary building the world's largest online marketplace. When Oprah Winfrey built her media empire, she wasn't behaving like a local talk show host. She was behaving like a global force. When Elon Musk invests in revolutionary technologies, he's not thinking like a cautious entrepreneur. He's thinking like someone who sees himself as a world changer. Identity drives action, and action shapes reality. The most profound transformations happen when people stop trying to fix their behavior and start upgrading their identity. Behavior comes from identity. You act like the person you believe you are. You speak like that person. You choose opportunities that match that person. You tolerate environments aligned with that person. You pursue goals that feel natural to that person. This is why habits don't stick when the identity stays the same. You can try waking up early, exercising, reading, or working on your goals, but if your identity still sees you as someone who lacks discipline, your brain will eventually pull you back into old patterns. The identity always wins. So, how do you shift an identity? You begin by recognizing that identity is not fixed. It is built. It is updated through deliberate thought, emotional repetition, and behavioral reinforcement. Your identity lives in your neural networks, and neural networks can be rewired. You can begin imagining yourself as the person you want to become. You can begin speaking like that person, thinking like that person, choosing like that person. You can begin surrounding yourself with environments that reinforce that version of you. Over time, the brain stops resisting this new identity and begins embracing it as truth. Identity shifting happens when you stop describing yourself based on your past and begin describing yourself based on your potential. Your past was written with an old level of awareness. That version of you didn't know what you know now. They didn't have the perspective you have now. They didn't have the emotional tools, the clarity, or the mental strength you've developed. But your brain will cling to that outdated version unless you intentionally disrupt it. This is why people feel trapped. They're not trapped by conditions. They're trapped by identity. You elevate your identity by aligning your thoughts, emotions, and micro-actions with the future version of you rather than the past version. When you think the way your future self thinks, the brain rewires. When you feel the emotions your future self embodies, confidence, clarity, certainty, abundance, your nervous system adapts. When you take actions, even small ones, that reflect your future self, your behavior begins reformatting your identity. You become the person you repeatedly prove yourself to be. Imagine stepping into the identity of someone who naturally attracts wealth. How would they carry themselves? How would they solve problems? How would they manage their energy, their decisions, their environment? How would they speak to themselves? How would they approach opportunities? If you begin embodying these answers even partially, your brain begins to shift. And once the identity shifts, the behaviors that once felt difficult become effortless. You no longer have to force discipline. You express discipline because it matches who you are. You no longer have to push yourself into confidence. You behave confidently because it aligns with your identity. This is why self-made millionaires often say success wasn't about the money. It was about who they became along the way. They had to outgrow the version of themselves that couldn't handle success. They had to become someone who felt comfortable with abundance, capable of managing growth, deserving of prosperity. This internal expansion allowed them to attract external expansion. The identity shift created the opportunity, not the other way around. Identity shifting is the ultimate brain training because it reprograms the foundation of your decision-making. It teaches your brain a new way of interpreting the world. It tells your nervous system a new emotional baseline. It gives your life a new direction. And once that shift is genuine, everything changes. Your habits, your relationships, your results, your opportunities, your self-worth. You begin moving through the world with a sense of inevitability rather than hope. You stop asking, "Will this happen for me?" and start thinking, "Of course this happens for me. It matches who I am." This is the truth most people never realize. You don't become successful and then adopt the identity. You adopt the identity, and then you become successful. Identity is the birthplace of destiny. And when you decide, truly decide, to update who you believe you are, your brain will follow, your habits will align, and your entire life will evolve to match the new story you're willing to own. Topic 7. Cognitive detox. Relearning how to think by removing the mental noise that sabotages success. One of the greatest barriers to wealth, clarity, success, and personal power is not a lack of intelligence or opportunity. It is the overwhelming amount of mental noise people carry without realizing how deeply it shapes their lives. The average person is drowning in unfiltered thoughts, unresolved emotions, outdated beliefs, mental clutter, digital distraction, and invisible narratives absorbed from family, society, culture, and past experiences. This mental noise becomes the subconscious soundtrack of their lives, influencing every decision they make, every risk they take, and every limitation they encounter. And unless they consciously detox their thinking, their brain remains trapped in a chaotic loop that prevents them from seeing clearly, acting boldly, or expanding into their true potential. Cognitive detox is not about thinking less. It is about thinking better. It is about unlearning the patterns that no longer serve you and creating internal space for clarity, creativity, intuition, and higher-level reasoning. The brain cannot innovate when it is overloaded. It cannot envision abundance while obsessing about scarcity. It cannot make empowered decisions when buried beneath layers of mental debris. People often assume their anxiety, indecision, procrastination, or low motivation is a personality trait, when in reality, these are symptoms of a mind operating with outdated, conflicting, or overloaded mental programs. Consider how successful leaders think: calm, strategic, focused, clear. They operate with a mental framework that filters noise rather than amplifying it. Warren Buffett often speaks about the importance of quiet thinking, long periods without external input, because he understands that clarity emerges from space, not speed. Bill Gates famously takes think weeks to disconnect from everything and allow his mind to reorganize itself. Phil Knight, the founder of Nike, described long reflective runs as the place where his best ideas were born. These people are not escaping life. They are detoxing their thinking so they can return with elevated clarity and direction. Mental noise accumulates from many sources: negative self-talk, unresolved emotional wounds, endless comparison, digital overstimulation, the pressure to perform, and the deeply internalized fear of making mistakes all contribute to cognitive clutter. When the brain is overloaded with this noise, it begins defaulting to survival mode. It becomes reactive instead of creative, defensive instead of open, anxious instead of empowered. It tries to conserve energy by avoiding risks and repeating familiar behaviors, even if those behaviors limit growth. This is why mental clutter keeps people small. It prevents the brain from accessing higher levels of insight, vision, and self-belief. A powerful cognitive detox begins with awareness. You must first recognize the internal noise that constantly competes for your attention. Maybe it's the voice from your past telling you you're not enough. Maybe it's the pressure of trying to meet expectations that aren't truly yours. Maybe it's the habit of comparing your journey to someone else's highlight reel. Maybe it's the fear of judgment or the fear of failure embedded so deeply in your nervous system that it influences decisions you aren't even conscious of. Becoming aware of these patterns doesn't fix them instantly, but awareness creates a separation. It allows you to observe your thoughts instead of becoming governed by them. Once you recognize the noise, you can begin to quiet it, and this is where transformational shifts occur. When you deliberately create mental space through silence, reflection, meditation, journaling, intentional breaks, or simply disconnecting from constant input, the brain begins to reorganize itself. The neural pathways associated with stress, fear, and overthinking begin to weaken. The pathways associated with clarity, confidence, intuition, and creativity begin to strengthen. Cognitive detox isn't about forcing new thoughts. It's about clearing the old ones so the new ones can emerge naturally. Imagine your mind as a room filled with old furniture that you never chose. Every piece represents a thought pattern someone else gave you. The fear passed down by parents who lived in scarcity, the belief that success must be earned through suffering, the idea that wanting more is selfish, the subconscious loyalty to a past version of yourself, the mental habit of expecting disappointment. These pieces of furniture block movement, block light, block creativity. You cannot redesign the room until you clear it. And once you start removing the clutter, even slowly, you begin to see the space differently. You begin to breathe differently. You begin to think differently. Cognitive detox is also about breaking the addiction to mental stimulation. Most people are uncomfortable with silence because silence reveals their real thoughts. They fill every gap with noise, scrolling, notifications, background distractions, until the brain never gets a chance to reset. But high performers intentionally create silence because they know silence is where insights live. It is where intuition becomes audible. It is where ideas are born before they become strategy. It is where you reconnect with the part of you that already knows what your next level looks like. When the brain is quiet, priorities become obvious. You suddenly realize which goals truly matter and which were merely social expectations. You begin to see what behaviors are draining your energy and which ones elevate you. You become aware of relationships that no longer align with your growth. You notice opportunities that were always there but lost in the noise. Cognitive detox sharpens your internal compass so you can navigate life with intention rather than impulse. But cognitive detox is not just about thought patterns, it's about emotional detox as well. Emotional clutter clouds the mind just as much as mental clutter. Old resentment, unprocessed grief, repressed anger, unresolved guilt, and buried disappointment all create internal friction that consumes mental energy. When you release these emotional burdens, through reflection, forgiveness, emotional expression, or simply giving yourself permission to let go, the mind becomes lighter. Ideas flow more freely. Decisions feel less complicated. Your future feels less tangled with your past. The brain finally has the space to envision something new. This is why cognitive detox is essential for prosperity. Wealth is not created from a chaotic mind. It is created from a clear one. Abundance flows to people who can see opportunities without distortion. Success comes to those who make decisions from clarity rather than confusion. Prosperity grows in the minds of those who have space for vision, strategy, creativity, and self-belief. When the noise dies down, your inner intelligence rises. You begin to trust yourself more. You begin to act with precision. You begin to access deeper insights that guide you toward the life you are meant to build. Cognitive detox is not a one-time event. It is a continuous practice of removing what no longer belongs in your mind. And the more you detox, the more you realize how powerful you truly are once the noise is gone. Your brain becomes your ally instead of your adversary. Your thoughts become tools instead of obstacles. Your mind becomes a place of clarity, not chaos. And from that clarity, the most extraordinary version of your life begins to unfold. Topic 8. The discipline of focus. Training your brain to eliminate distraction and execute with powerful consistency. If there is one superpower that separates extraordinary achievers from the rest of the world, it is not talent, intelligence, charisma, or even ambition. It is focus. Focus is the ability to direct your mental energy toward a single intention long enough for that intention to become reality. Focus is discipline in motion. Focus is identity in action. Focus is the quiet force that transforms ideas into outcomes, dreams into achievements, and potential into prosperity. And yet, focus is the skill most people never learn to master because their brains have been conditioned, often since childhood, to respond to distraction instead of intention. The modern world has turned distraction into a lifestyle. Notifications, noise, comparison, instant gratification, and constant stimulation have trained the brain to crave novelty instead of mastery. But what most people never realize is that every moment of distraction is a moment of brain training. Every time you break concentration to check your phone, your brain memorizes that pattern. Every time you abandon a task midway to chase another dopamine hit, your brain rewires itself to expect interruption. Every time you choose the easy path instead of the focused one, your mind becomes more comfortable with scattered thinking. The brain becomes excellent at whatever it practices, and most people unknowingly practice distraction all day long. On the other hand, the wealthiest, most successful individuals in the world have trained their brains the opposite way. They understand that focus is the currency that builds empires. They know that execution requires depth, not constant switching. They recognize that mastery is not born from talent, but from uninterrupted concentration. Consider Warren Buffett, who has built one of the greatest fortunes in history by patiently focusing on long-term value while the rest of the world chases short-term noise. Consider Steve Jobs, whose obsessive focus on simplicity shaped entire industries. Consider athletes, musicians, entrepreneurs, and innovators, whose legendary results can be traced back not to brilliance, but to unwavering concentration applied consistently over time. Focus is not an accident for these individuals. It is a mental discipline, a trained skill, a conscious identity. The brain thrives on focus because focus conserves mental energy. When the mind is scattered, it burns through cognitive resources quickly, leaving little room for creativity, decision-making, or strategic thinking. When the mind is focused, those resources are concentrated and amplified. Neuroscience shows that deep focus produces a state known as flow, where the brain becomes hyper-efficient, fully engaged, and capable of levels of performance that feel almost effortless. But flow does not happen in distracted minds. It happens in trained ones. Learning to focus is not about forcing yourself into long periods of productivity. It is about gradually training your brain to tolerate deeper and deeper levels of concentration. Distraction has taught your brain that anything difficult or uncomfortable should be avoided. Focus teaches your brain that effort leads to reward. When you stay with a task long enough to push through the initial discomfort, you activate neural circuits associated with resilience, discipline, and delayed gratification. These circuits strengthen with repetition until focus becomes more natural than distraction. Focus also shapes identity. When you follow through consistently, even on small tasks, your brain begins to see you as someone who executes. And when you identify as someone who executes, you naturally act in ways that reinforce that identity. You begin finishing what you start. You begin taking commitments seriously. You begin trusting yourself. You begin aligning with the version of you that creates results rather than dreaming about them. This internal shift is one of the most powerful psychological transformations a person can experience, because once you trust yourself to follow through, nothing feels impossible. But focus requires boundaries, not just external boundaries, but internal ones. You must protect your mental energy from the people, habits, and environments that drain it. You must choose where your attention goes instead of letting the world decide for you. You must value your time enough to guard it. Successful people are not antisocial. They are intentional. They don't eliminate all distractions. They eliminate the ones that don't serve their vision. They don't chase every opportunity. They pursue the ones aligned with their identity. They don't allow every voice into their mind. They filter input deliberately to protect their clarity. Focus is also deeply connected to emotional regulation. When you are overwhelmed, anxious, or stressed, the brain becomes scattered because survival mode is incompatible with deep concentration. This is why emotional conditioning and cognitive detox work hand in hand with the discipline of focus. A calm mind focuses more easily. A confident mind sustains attention longer. A regulated nervous system moves into flow more naturally. Focus is not just a cognitive skill, it is an emotional one. Imagine what your life would look like if you trained your brain to focus with precision. Imagine completing projects instead of starting 20 at once. Imagine learning new skills with speed because your mind is fully engaged. Imagine building wealth steadily because you follow through on long-term plans instead of being derailed by short-term impulses. Imagine rising in your career because you work with depth and clarity while others drown in distraction. Imagine becoming the version of yourself who moves with intention, whose actions carry weight, whose presence feels grounded and powerful. This is not fantasy. This is the inevitable result of brain training. When you practice focus, even for short periods each day, you begin reshaping neural pathways. You begin weakening your brain's addiction to distraction. You begin strengthening your capacity for deep work, deep vision, deep execution. And as your focus grows, your results amplify. This is how successful people operate. They do not rely on motivation. They rely on concentration. They do not chase momentum. They build it through consistent attention. Focus is not about intensity. It is about direction. It is about deciding what matters and committing your mind to it fully. It is about removing the unnecessary so the essential can flourish. It is about choosing your future over your impulses. It is about training your brain to recognize that your dreams deserve more attention than your distractions. When you master focus, you master creation. You begin designing your life rather than reacting to it. You begin shaping your destiny with intention instead of hoping for luck. Focus is how you turn mental power into physical results. It is how you bring your vision out of your mind and into the world. And once your brain learns to operate with this level of clarity and consistency, the trajectory of your life begins to accelerate in ways that feel almost magical. The success you once chased begins to chase you. The opportunities you once hoped for begin to appear naturally. Because focus is the gateway to mastery, and mastery is the foundation of an extraordinary life. Topic 9. The Art of Self-Directed Neuroplasticity. rewiring your brain through conscious repetition and deliberate practice. There is a moment in every person's journey when they realize that their brain is not a fixed machine but a living instrument, one that can be shaped, stretched, strengthened, refined, and completely reprogrammed through intentional repetition. This realization is liberating because it means your past does not determine your future. Your patterns do, and patterns can be rewired. Every thought you repeat, every emotion you rehearse, every behavior you choose, every belief you reinforce becomes part of your brain's architecture. This is neuroplasticity, the ability of your brain to reorganize itself, create new neural connections, weaken old ones, and evolve with every conscious choice you make. When you understand this, you stop seeing yourself as limited and start seeing yourself as unfinished, still molding, still expanding, still becoming. Most people move through life unaware of this power. They operate from habits they never chose, beliefs they inherited, emotional triggers shaped by childhood, fears shaped by past disappointments, and behaviors shaped by environments that no longer reflect who they want to become. They feel stuck not because they are incapable of more, but because their brains are running old programs on autopilot. But the truth is this: your brain is always changing. The question is whether it is changing intentionally or unconsciously. The greatest breakthroughs happen when you stop letting life shape your brain and start shaping your brain to shape your life. Self-directed neuroplasticity is the practice of intentionally training your brain to support the identity, habits, emotions, and outcomes you want. It is how people reinvent themselves. It is how people heal from past trauma. It is how people develop extraordinary confidence, discipline, creativity, and focus. It is how people who once struggled financially rewire their internal relationship with money until abundance feels natural instead of foreign. When someone goes from insecurity to unstoppable self-belief, from self-sabotage to self-mastery, from scarcity thinking to wealth consciousness, they aren't lucky. They have rewired their neural pathways through repetition and reinforcement. Consider the stories of people like Oprah Winfrey, who rewrote her internal narrative from one of adversity to one of impact. Consider entrepreneurs like Sarah Blakely, who rewired her fear response by reframing failure as information. Consider someone like Jim Carrey, who used mental rehearsal so consistently that his brain accepted success long before the world recognized it. These individuals were not born with exceptional brains. They created them. They trained their minds the way athletes train their bodies. They practiced new ways of thinking until old patterns lost their power. They used neuroplasticity as a tool for transformation. Neuroscience shows that when you repeat a thought or a behavior, your brain releases neurotransmitters that strengthen the connections between neurons. The more frequently you repeat the pattern, the stronger the connection becomes. Eventually, the pattern becomes automatic. This is why someone who repeatedly thinks self-limiting thoughts becomes someone who expects failure. It's why someone who practices gratitude becomes someone who feels abundant even before success arrives. It's why someone who rehearses confidence begins to act confidently without forcing it. Neural pathways do not care whether the pattern is empowering or destructive. They strengthen whatever you repeat. This is where conscious repetition becomes so important. You can intentionally choose the patterns you want to strengthen. You can teach your brain new emotional responses, new levels of discipline, new self-beliefs, new habits, new expectations. You can replace self-doubt with certainty, fear with courage, scarcity with abundance, and hesitation with momentum. The brain responds to what you feed it consistently, not occasionally. And when you feed it the same empowering pattern long enough, it becomes the new default, the new truth, the new identity. Self-directed neuroplasticity means you become the sculptor of your mind. You decide what thoughts deserve rehearsal. You decide which emotions deserve reinforcement. You decide which beliefs deserve to stay and which ones must be replaced. You decide who you are becoming, not based on your past, but based on your potential. Every repetition becomes a vote for your future self. Every moment of resistance you push through becomes a signal to your brain that you are evolving. Every intentional thought becomes a stroke of the brush in the painting of your identity. But neuroplasticity also requires emotional engagement. The brain changes most effectively when repetition is infused with emotion. When you visualize a powerful future with passion, your brain encodes it more deeply. When you practice gratitude with sincerity, your neural circuits shift faster. When you reflect on past victories with pride, your confidence circuits strengthen. Emotion amplifies neuroplasticity because it increases the brain's readiness to learn. This is why people who live with emotional numbness struggle to break old patterns. They rehearse the absence of emotion instead of the presence of possibility. To transform your life, you must be willing to practice the patterns of the person you want to become even before you feel like that person. This is not delusion. It is training. It is rehearsing the future so your brain accepts it. At first, it feels unnatural, just like learning a new language feels unnatural. But with repetition, the unfamiliar becomes familiar, and the familiar becomes effortless. This is how people who once felt unworthy begin to radiate confidence. It is how people who once avoided responsibility begin to lead with clarity. It is how people who once feared failure begin to pursue bold opportunities. They trained their brains until the identity they once imagined became the identity they embodied. Imagine, for a moment, what would happen if you spent the next year intentionally feeding your brain with thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that align with the most powerful version of yourself. Imagine if you practiced courage daily, even in small moments. Imagine if you rehearsed abundance instead of worrying about lack. Imagine if you reinforced confidence instead of replaying insecurity. Imagine if you trained your mind to expect opportunities instead of threats. Your entire life would change, not because of luck, but because you rewired the instrument that shapes your decisions, your actions, your habits, your identity, your relationships, and your reality. Self-directed neuroplasticity is not about becoming a different person. It is about becoming more of who you were meant to be before the world programmed you with fear, doubt, or limitation. It is about reclaiming authorship of your mind. It is about shaping the internal world so the external world reflects it. And once you realize you can rewire your brain intentionally, you understand that no pattern is permanent, no limitation is final, and no identity is fixed unless you choose to keep it that way. You are not stuck. You are simply rehearsing old neural pathways. And the moment you decide to rehearse new ones with clarity, emotion, and consistency, your mind and your life begin to transform at a depth most people never experience. This is the art of self-directed neuroplasticity, the power to become the designer of your own evolution, the architect of your destiny, and the master of the mind that creates your reality. Topic 10. The Awakening. Claim the mind, claim the future, claim the life you were meant to live. There is a moment in every powerful journey when something inside you awakens, quietly at first, then undeniably. A moment when you recognize that the distance between who you are and who you want to become is not measured in talent, luck, or external circumstances, but in the quality of your thoughts, the strength of your focus, the patterns of your mind, and the identity you decide to embrace. When you reach this moment, everything changes. Your past loses its authority. Your fears lose their power. Your limits lose their meaning. Because you finally understand that you are not confined by the mind you inherited. You are liberated by the mind you choose to build. This is the awakening, the realization that your brain is not your master. It is your instrument. The realization that success is not something that happens to certain people. It is something that is cultivated through intentional mental training. The realization that abundance is not a privilege. It is a pattern. That prosperity is not accidental. It is a mindset. That confidence is not a personality trait. It is a practice. That clarity is not discovered, it is created. You become aware, maybe for the first time in your life, that you hold the brush that paints your identity, the hammer that shapes your habits, the chisel that sculpts your thoughts. And from that moment on, you stop waiting for transformation and start generating it. Look back at the journey you've taken through these 10 brain training secrets. You learned that your brain becomes whatever you repeatedly feed it. You learned that your attention directs the type of reality you experience. You learned that mental imagery shapes your emotional responses and prepares your identity for success before success arrives. You learned that emotional conditioning becomes the foundation of your actions. You learned that micro-actions accumulate into identity shifts. You learned that your sense of self determines how far your potential can reach. You learned that cognitive detox creates space for clarity and innovation. You learned that focus is the highest form of self-respect. You learned that neuroplasticity allows you to reinvent any part of your mental world. And now, here you are, standing at the threshold of the most important realization of all. None of these tools matter unless you decide to use them intentionally, consistently, and unapologetically. This conclusion is not an ending. It is a beginning, a threshold, a doorway, an invitation to step into the version of yourself that has been quietly waiting beneath the noise, the fear, the doubt, the distraction, the hesitation. A version of you that is not intimidated by challenges, but energized by them. A version of you that is not held back by old stories, but motivated by new visions. A version of you that does not shrink at the thought of greatness, but expects it. A version of you that understands the incredible truth that the mind is the engine behind every transformation you have ever witnessed in your life or admired in someone else. Think about the people who inspire you. Visionaries, creators, leaders, entrepreneurs, changemakers, the ones who seemed to rise from nothing and become something extraordinary. What set them apart was not that they were chosen or gifted, they simply learned to discipline their minds in ways most people never attempt. They repeated thoughts that empowered them. They trained emotions that strengthened them. They created habits that elevated them. They cultivated focus that protected them. They embraced identities that expanded them. And most importantly, they did it long enough for the world to reflect the internal transformation they had already completed. You are capable of this same evolution. More than capable. You are wired for it. Your brain is built to grow, built to adapt, built to reprogram itself at any age, at any stage, under any circumstances. It does not care what you were told growing up. It does not care how many mistakes you have made. It does not care how long you've struggled. It does not care what you think you lack. It responds to repetition, emotion, intention, and belief. It responds to the person you decide to become today, not the person you were yesterday. Your brain is waiting for instruction, waiting for direction, waiting for you to claim authorship over your life. So let this be the moment when everything shifts. When you stop seeing yourself as someone chasing a better life and start seeing yourself as someone creating one. When you stop waiting for motivation and start building momentum. When you stop negotiating with excuses and start negotiating with your future. When you stop identifying with your limitations and start identifying with your possibilities. When you stop rehearsing old patterns and start reinforcing new ones. When you stop hoping and start deciding. Because transformation begins the moment you decide you deserve more, and the moment you decide to become someone who consistently acts like they deserve more. Imagine the life waiting on the other side of that decision. Imagine waking up with a brain trained to focus instead of fragment, a mind trained to expect abundance instead of fear scarcity, a nervous system trained to stay calm under pressure instead of collapsing under stress, a self-image trained to reflect strength, worthiness, and potential, a future self so powerful, so grounded, so clear that you barely recognize the person you once were, not because life magically changed, but because your mind did, and life had no choice but to follow. This is the truth that will change everything for you. The life you want is not created through chance or luck or timing. It is created through mental architecture, through disciplined thoughts, through intentional emotions, through refined focus, through courageous identity shifts, through persistent neuroplasticity, through the relentless commitment to rehearsing your future until it becomes your present. Transformation is not something you find. It is something you build from the inside out. And now the power is in your hands. Not tomorrow, not someday, now. Because your brain is listening, your identity is listening, your future is listening. And every thought, every repetition, every moment of focus, every intentional choice from this point forward becomes a signal to your mind that you are done living small, done living unconsciously, done living reactively. You are stepping into a life that reflects your potential, your purpose, your intelligence, your resilience, your vision. You are awakening to the truth that you are the architect, not the passenger, the creator, not the observer, the author, not the bystander. This is your awakening. Claim your mind and you claim your future. Claim your focus and you claim your power. Claim your identity and you claim your destiny. Nothing is out of reach now, not for the person you are becoming. If this video awakened something in you, if even one sentence opened a door in your mind, if you felt a shift, a spark, a moment of clarity that reminded you of who you truly are becoming, then don't let this be the end of your transformation. Let it be the beginning. Your future self is built through decisions just like this one. Decisions to learn more, grow more, and rise higher. So take a moment, breathe deeply, and if this message resonated, make a powerful commitment right now. Hit subscribe so you never miss another breakthrough like this. Click like so. YouTube knows this is the kind of content the world needs. Share this video with someone you love, someone whose potential deserves to be awakened too. And comment below with the words, "I am rewiring my mind to anchor this new identity into your reality." This is your community, your space for expansion, your place to grow into the person you were always meant to be. Your journey doesn't end here, it evolves from here. Welcome to the Success and Prosperity Code. Your next level begins now.